So this is my 2.3 presentation on fatigue and recovery. So I'm just going to go through the causes of fatigue during sport. So different activities which differ in intensity depends on how quickly we fatigue. The intensity also depends on what muscle fibers you're using during the activity, such as how we will use fast glycolytic fibers when participating in sports which require maximal intensity for a short duration, such as 100-meter sprinting. These fibers will fatigue our muscles quickly as they use oxygen more rapidly to create quicker contractions needed in sprinting, as you want to get to the end quicker than your competitors. Slow oxidative fibers will fatigue slower as they are used in lower intensity sports with long duration, such as marathon running, where your muscles use the oxygen more efficiently to power contractions. However, there are two main reasons why our muscles fatigue due to the lack of energy sources. Firstly, the depletion of energy sources that help provide us with energy to power our muscle contractions, and that we cannot perform at high standards, which may well see us lose our competition. So, creatine depletion. This is a problem due to how it results in what energy system we use. If you're a 400-meter runner, this may be a problem as you need to work maximally for longer than a 100-meter runner who can afford to use ATP quickly, as the event itself will be over just as quickly. This means that if you do not have enough creatine whilst running this 400-meter sprint, your body may have to switch between the energy systems. When you start out of the blocks, you'll be using your ATP PC system for around 3 to 10 seconds of that race, which is good for the time being as your ATP is able to resynthesize. However, after those seconds, your body will run out of this creatine needed to break down the ATP and resynthesize the ATP, and this will result in you using your lactic acid system, where you'll begin resynthesizing ATP again, but creating the byproduct of lactic acid. This lactic acid will inhibit the enzymes breaking down the glucose and glycogen, making the system less efficient. To stop this depletion of creatine, athletes would store up more on creatine supplements so that the creatine won't run out, and your body can keep breaking down ADP and resynthesizing this ATP with your muscle contractions. Athletes would take 5 grams of this creatine powder, that 4 to 6 times a day, 2 days before the event, and this will allow for your body to fully stock up so that you won't run out of the supply during your competition. There also, during exercise, our glucose and glycogen levels will deplete due to how we use them up to provide energy for our muscles, because they help in breaking down the ATP. Our energy systems use the forms of carbohydrates in the body, glucose and glycogen, to help the production of ATP. So it's important to begin carbo loading before you participate in sports that require you to work for long periods of time, such as long distance running, cycling or swimming. This is because your body will need to use the glucose and glycogen constantly to help the resynthesizing of ATP to create the muscle contractions. However, we do not have enough of glucose and glycogen due to us consuming insufficient amounts before we exercise. We will completely run out of the glucose and glycogen, and we'll feel the experience of what is called hitting the wall, where you will experience sudden fatigue and energy loss due to the depletion of the glucose in the muscles and the liver. You may be just over halfway in a marathon where you haven't paced yourself properly and you're using glucose too quick. This will result in you running out, and you will experience bonking or hitting the wall where you don't have the glucose to help resynthesize the ATP and give the energy to your muscles. And this is what the fatigue index graph on the slide shows, how Charlie White had a fatigue index of 80% whilst Dan had a fatigue index of just over 40%, taking part in the same exercise. And this may suggest that Dan had more glucose that he could break down and help with the production of ATP, whilst Charlie didn't have enough, so he started to fatigue due to how his muscles didn't have any ATP to properly maintain the contractions for a more constant while. And this is how carbo loading will help prevent you from running out of these energy supplies, as you diet and increase daily carbohydrate before your event, usually around 4 days before you participate. and this allows for your body to stock up again on glucose and glycogen, so that during the performance you won't run out and you don't have to start burning muscle protein to keep your muscles contracting. During exercise, our bodies may also produce byproducts or waste products due to the way we utilize the energy sources we consume. One of them is carbon dioxide. Despite it being a byproduct, it isn't incredibly harmful to us. This is due to how we constantly are exhaling it, due to how we inhale oxygen, which is eventually taken to the muscles where it is used to create contractions. The muscles will eventually convert the oxygen into carbon dioxide as they work and contract, and the CO2 levels are monitored by the chemoreceptors so that they don't go too high, and naturally the CO2 will diffuse from the muscle cells into the capillaries, carried by the hemoglobin, due to how there's a steep gradient due to the hemoglobin coming from the lungs having very low amounts of CO2, and the working muscles having very high amounts, creating high partial pressure in the muscles. 23% of this carbon dioxide will associate to the hemoglobin that is in the red blood cells that consist in the capillaries, and this creates carbaminohemoglobin. 3% of CO2 will be dissolved into the blood plasma, whilst the majority of the CO2 will become carbonic acid, 70%. The carbaminohemoglobin will be taken up to the lungs, where it will diffuse in the alveoli, where will be finally exhaled. Lactic acid is the most common accelerator of fatigue, and it will cause many problems during exercise. It will be produced during exercise, which is usually of a long duration. This is due to how during these long duration running sports, such as marathon running, our bodies will start off using the ATP-PC system, as we have phosphocreatine that can be used to resynthesize ATP. However, this one only lasts up to 10 seconds until your body will start to use the lactic acid system. This is due to how we run out of phosphocreatine to use, so we convert to breaking down glycogen, glucose and pyruvate. However, this will create the byproduct of lactic acid, and this lactic acid will increase the acidity, decrease the pH levels, and this will effectively start inhibiting the enzymes which break down the glycogen and the glucose. The blood lactate graph on the slide shows how this person hit their onset of blood lactate accumulation, or OBLA, when they accumulated 4 millimoles of blood lactate, and this meant that heart rate had to increase to get blood to the liver, where the lactate can be converted back into pyruvate and then glucose to help back the process of ATP being resynthesized. Heat is also created due to the inefficiency of our bodies using oxygen. Only 20% of the oxygen goes towards the mechanical work of fueling our muscles contraction, whilst 80% is converted into heat energy. This causes problems when we exercise, as we increase in temperature. Will result in us losing bodily fluid through how we sweat to cool us down. This becomes a bigger problem when we become dehydrated and start feeling dizzy. Dehydration can become even more serious when you get hypothermia, due to how you have no more fluid to sweat and cool yourself down with, so your body temperature will increase above the homeostasis of 35 degrees. We can control our temperature, however, as when we are cold, the hairs on our skin may stand up to trap warm air, and they will flatten to keep at the same temperature. We can do this as the thermoreceptors sense that the body is either too cold or too warm, and send the information to the medulla oblongata, and that can tell small muscles to contract and make the hair stand up. We can also fatigue due to the inhibiting of our neurons and nerve impulses. This can mean for us becoming slow whilst we perform in a sport due to poor transmissions or lack of action potentials to help function contractions. Acetylcholine is one of the 3 causes of neuromuscular fatigue. It acts as an action potential to create contractions, and if there is insufficient acetylcholine, crossing the reactor sites, and there is nothing for the neurotransmitter to attach to and send the signal across the synapse. However, with just enough acetylcholine crosses, then muscle contraction will become possible. Furthermore, the molecule cholinesterase is needed to break down acetylcholine after its role of being an action potential is completed. This is so that the process can be made again, as the synaptic cleft needs to be cleared of all of the acetylcholine so that the muscle can carry on contracting. The reduction of the calcium ions being released, due to them being released, another cause of neuromuscular fatigue. This happens due to you being fatigued, and fatigued muscles will leak the calcium, and this means that the contractions become weaker due to how silent filament theory has been restricted. This is down to there being less calcium to bind to troponin, which ultimately is needed to expose actin sites for myosin to attach to, push on the actin and perform a contraction. The lack of calcium means that there are less sites for myosin to grapple to and powerfully stroke the actin, pushing it on. Finally, as we exercise for long periods of time, our bodies will transfer energy systems, as after the 3 to 10 seconds of our PC system will no longer work due to the loss of the creatine. This will then mean we will begin to use our lactic acid energy system, which will ultimately lead to the build-up of lactic acid itself. This increase in acidity will mean that impulses from our muscle fibers are slower, leading to slower contractions, meaning for slower reaction times. Due to how the impulses are also much slower, this means that the strength of the muscle twitch is much smaller, which only allows for a more minimal amount of force to be applied. This would be common to see in boxing as you get into later rounds, and due to how you're constantly throwing punches, you begin to build up lactic acid, which starts to inhibit the speed of your muscle fiber impulses. This will cause for your force to get smaller and you will inflict less damage on your opponent, ultimately meaning that you will get beaten. And that's it. So thank you for listening.